In part one of this series on ITG, we take a look at the controlled chaos of Zac Alley's defense, where he's been, what he's accomplished, and what West Virginia fans might expect this fall. That's coming your way on this episode of In the Gun.
You blitz all night!
And now you've forced them into a situation where they can't be who they want to be on offense.
Rush the quarterback.
I've heard it for a long time, pressure breaks pipes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a scoop shot by Oklahoma. Another defensive score.
I think this scheme is locked in, and that's what had to happen for them to be able to pull off this upset.
Three receivers bunched right. They pitch it that area. Dangerous throw. Intercepted. Eli Bowen, the true freshman, swipes it as Monroe throws his first pick in the last 4 games, and this one could be crucial.
I'll admit, I don't know much about Eli Bowen, the freshman corner who pounced on that quick screen for Oklahoma to get the pick. But I do know from how that unfolded that he's a smart football player, and smart football players win games. I wasn't surprised to read that Bowen made the SEC academic honor roll. He's obviously an intelligent kid. Welcome to it, folks. I'm Jed Drenning, and you are In the Gun. This episode of ITG is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. Now, it doesn't take much to do a post-mortem on this play in Oklahoma's upset win over Alabama last season and piece some things together. After all, it's always easy to understand things after the fact. Alabama was on the right hash and offered up trips into the boundary with the back offset next to Jalen Monroe to that side on this RPO. Good money says that if you go back and watch enough Bama film going into that matchup in Norman, the Tide had showed this look before. Heavy numbers into the short side with the back offset toward the trips. I'd bet Zac Alley and the OU defensive staff included this on the tip sheet to their players. And I'd also wager that that young cornerback, Eli Bowen, is the kind of kid who takes his craft seriously enough to give those weekly scouting reports the attention they deserve. In coaching parlance, what Bama did here was ride and decide. We see Monroe ride the mesh of running back Jam Miller on an inside zone as he reads the boundary end, deciding if he's going to give the football to Miller or keep it. But neither of those two choices matter much to cornerback Eli Bowen. What matters to him is the third element of the play, the perimeter screen attached as an added answer in the quick pass game that Monroe can go to if he likes the numbers to that short side. And guess what? He did like the numbers, and why wouldn't he? If you look at this, all they got to do is seal off the 2 lower defenders with the 2 receivers, and that leaves the receiver you target with the screen one-on-one with that safety downfield, flying in open space trying to make the tackle. It would seem a favorable setup for Alabama. So Monroe, seeing the same thing, came out of his read with the back and flipped the ball that way. What Monroe couldn't have anticipated, though, was the cornerback IDing the screen fast enough to blow past Devontae Smith's attempted block and destroy things before they even started. This is how you get an otherwise high percentage, low-risk throw on a quick screen, resulting in a turnover. Things like this don't happen on their own. Eli Bowen knew what Alabama was trying to do here at the same time that Jalen Monroe knew. It's amazing what a well-coached, well-drilled defender can achieve when his preparation removes the element of surprise from the offense's list of advantages. Now think about this. Bowen might only be 5'9", but his football IQ in this situation gives Oklahoma the ball in the red zone. A 6'2" cornerback without those same smarts might in fact drop into coverage, not fight off the block in time, and give Alabama a first down. Intelligence can conquer a lot of perceived deficiencies in a football player, and smart coaches try to cultivate that trait.
I think Michael Jordan said talent wins games, talent plus intelligence wins championships. And so we always want to find the guys that can learn football, that they understand the game. The game is slower for them.
Intelligence and foresight can, of course, be a benefit at any position on the field, but sometimes they might be even more critical on the defensive side of the football. That's where players are charged with overcoming the advantages the offense enjoys on every snap. Knowing the play, knowing the snap count, dictating the tempo. I think you get the idea. And this is coming from an old offensive guy, but I have to admit it. An ability to diagnose things before they happen might be the most undersold talent a defender can wield. It can compensate for a lot and help elevate a guy to greatness. We faced a few of these provident types when I was playing, and when we did, I hated it. I'd much rather try and roll against a really fast, really athletic defense that you could outwit than a really smart, well-coached defense that smoked out your tells and tendencies before you even knew you had tells and tendencies. Don't get me started on the Shepherd Rams defense that Jeff Castile coached back in the early 90s when we were at Glenville. The history of West Virginia football is littered with examples of these kinds of guys. WVU great Reed Williams wasn't the fastest guy on the field, but he might have been the smartest. Reed, an academic All-American and the defensive MVP of the Fiesta Bowl win over Oklahoma, was blessed with incredible vision and a knack for quickly identifying what an offense was doing. Mountaineer defensive back Steve Newberry probably wasn't going to anchor the 4x1 on West Virginia's track team, but his football IQ and instincts made him truly special in Don Nehlen's secondary in the early 80s. Newberry finished his career with 20 interceptions, the most in school history, and was ultimately inducted into the WVU Sports Hall of Fame. The truth is, if you start down a list of high IQ, intelligent West Virginia defenders, this could go on all day. But before that happens, we better take care of some quick housekeeping by reminding you, if you enjoy our content, please subscribe to catch new content as it comes up, but also give a nod to our sponsors and do business with the folks who do business with us here at ITG. That, of course, includes J.R. Toothman and our friends at Toothman Ford in Grafton. We all know that cars cost less in Grafton. Let's also give a shout out to Fortis and our friend Rick Lewis. For roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed, be sure to visit fortis.us.com. And of course, what a great time for a shout out to Tim Johnston and our friends at Johnston Equipment right out there on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan, and online at johnstoneq.com. You ever hear of Carl Sagan? Really smart dude who wore a lot of hats. He was the associate director of the Center for Radiophysics and Space Research at Cornell. Say that 5 times fast, the old CRSR. He also wrote the book that the Jodie Foster movie Contact was based on.
They're alive.
Now that's a sneaky good flick from the late 90s if you're looking to add something to your watch list. At any rate, in my off-season quest to maximize my understanding of Zac Alley's defense, that's no short order, by the way, I was reminded of one of the many discerning quotes by Carl Sagan. He said, "You have to know the past to understand the present." Sagan was the ultimate brainiac, and who am I to argue with an exobiologist? So, back I went to the grassroots of the defense that Zac Alley has now put his own stamp on. And we're going to get into that in just a minute, but speaking of brainiacs, did you know Zac Alley scored in the 30s on his ACT? 32 maybe, something like that. I had to look this up because I didn't score in the 30s. As it turns out, scores in that range put you in or above the 97th percentile, sending a lot of folks that do so on a path to become Ivy League educated engineers or Stanford biochemists. To do what Zac did and choose instead to use that level of intellect to haunt college quarterbacks on Saturdays in the fall seems almost diabolical, like a Bond villain scheming to nuke Fort Knox instead of using his genius to cure disease.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Zac Alley's made a name for himself as a young up-and-comer in the coaching ranks, the definition of a gridiron wonderkind. He's barely into his 30s, yet he's already been part of 14 bowl games, including the first bowl victory in Jacksonville State history a couple years ago against Lafayette, and multiple CFP playoff games. He's been a member of the winning staff in not one, but 2 national championships. 4 years ago, he was called to install his own defense at UL Monroe, making him the youngest coordinator in all of FBS at just 27 years old. Just 2 years later, at Jax State, he was the architect of a unit that led Conference USA in scoring defense, total defense, and rush defense. Like all coaches, Zac Alley's no doubt had several folks influence his approach to football, but it's likely none have impacted him more than his mentor, Oklahoma head coach Brent Venables. All told, Alley spent 8 years with Venables at Clemson and Oklahoma. And that's why if we hope to understand the foundation of Zac Alley's defense, it helps to travel 30-plus years into the past, back to Manhattan, Kansas, where Brent Venables played linebacker for Bill Snyder's K-State Wildcats in the early 90s. After his playing career, Venables threw a whistle around his neck and joined Snyder's defensive staff at KSU, learning under co-D coordinators Bob Stoops and Jim Leavitt. The Wildcats staff understood the basic but critical wisdom in football that you build your team to win your league. Your personnel and your scheme should be geared toward overcoming the teams that reside atop your conference standings. Bill Snyder took over the K-State program in the Little Apple when the Wildcats were a Big 8 doormat trying to climb out of the conference cellar. As such, K-State tailored their defense toward slowing down the most daunting force in the league at the time, Tom Osborne's powerhouse Nebraska teams. What Stoops and Leavitt installed fit perfectly with the culture Snyder was building. A physical 4-3 under defense with an imposing front seven built to attack gaps and stop the run, but with the creativity and subterfuge to also be effective against the pass. The Wildcats didn't actually beat the Huskers in those early years of the Snyder era, but they did at least keep them in the corral, holding Nebraska under its season scoring average 3 times in the 4 years that Stoops and Leavitt shared the keys of the K-State defense. The defensive effort by KSU that jumps out most when you study the units crafted during that time by Stoops and Leavitt might be the Wildcats' 1994 tilt with the number 2 ranked Cornhuskers. K-State didn't win the game, but from their even front 4-3 base, they did maintain leverage and use sound force angles and good eyes to frustrate Nebraska like few others during that era, holding the Huskers to 260 total yards, 218 yards below their season average. More than a decade later, when Jim Leavitt became the head coach at South Florida, he too built his team to win its league. Leavitt did so by recruiting smaller, athletic speed merchants to chase down the West Virginia rushing attack that was blazing the way to Big East titles. This approach did help the Bulls upset the Mountaineers twice, but ultimately it came at a price to USF. Jim Leavitt's smallish defenders weren't built to withstand late-season conference trips into the cold where they tangled with giant offensive lines and pro-style systems that were paving the road for NFL tailbacks like Ray Rice and LaShawn McCoy and Isaiah Peed. Bob Stoops, meanwhile, moved on from K-State to Florida, where he became the D coordinator for Steve Spurrier, and then, of course, on to Oklahoma as the head coach, where his disciple Venables joined him for 13 seasons, holding multiple titles for Stoops, including defensive coordinator. This pair of defensive innovators adjusted to life in the pass-happy Big 12 by putting more speed on the field while adding alignment wrinkles and deploying the zone blitz. After Clemson was shelled in the 2012 Orange Bowl by West Virginia, Tigers defensive coordinator Kevin Steele was jettisoned. Brent Venables arrived from Oklahoma to take things over on the defensive side for Dabo Swinney. By this time, Venables had become a man of many defensive fronts, many coverage combinations, and many pressure packages. He never stopped tinkering, and this is where Brent Venables, the understudy of Bob Stoops, found his own disciple and Tigers student assistant, Zac Alley.
I actually thought I wanted to be an offensive guy when I started out, when I got to college, but then Coach Venables talked me into coming over to the dark side.
After Zac Alley was hired at Oklahoma last year, Lewis Racer from OU Daily wrote a heck of an article detailing his history with Brent Venables. I'll leave the link in the show description. It's a great read that'll interest Mountaineer fans. In the story, Racer wrote about the early days of Venables' new gig in Death Valley 13 years ago. That included several 9-hour days locked in the film room with Zac Alley. It was during this time that Alley developed his appreciation for Venables' scheme. It was also here that Venables recognized Alley's advanced understanding of the game and his insatiable desire to learn more. Racer points out that Alley even earned a headset on game day at Clemson, something in 2012 you didn't often see with student assistants. Alley was tasked with watching and diagramming every snap. He turned his play sheets over to Venables at halftime, providing insight that helped the D coordinator adjust the Tigers' second-half approach. All told, Alley spent 7 seasons at Clemson, grinding and learning under Venables as the Tigers' pressure defense ranked in the top 15 nationally in sacks the last 6 years, helping the Tigers win 4 ACC titles and 2 national titles. The Clemson defense had become a force of nature, but in football, stagnation is an unforgivable sin. And by the time Zac Alley was running the show himself defensively in Jacksonville for Coach Rod, his defense had added so many wrinkles, it was basically a wrinkle itself. Constantly adjusting to mitigate an opponent's greatest threat and to render an offense less prepared. And we're going to dive into the details of that right after this quick break. Stick around because we're also going to invite you into the ITG film room to dissect some of Zac Alley's sinister schemes. Now, I feel like I should send you into the break with an evil laugh, but don't worry, I won't. You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
You're listening to Mountaineer Football Talk.
ITG.
At Coyote, we're going to treat you like dirt because we hold dirt in the highest regard. We're honored to find it under our fingernails. It keeps us humble, honest. If you know us, you know getting treated like dirt means getting treated with respect. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing or a free loader with low-rate financing on select Coyote models in stock.
Come check out our new Coyotes at Johnston Equipment.
There are certain weeks we play with true 3 safeties. Sometimes we play with 3 safeties and a nickel. Sometimes we play with a nickel and 2 safeties. Sometimes we play with 2 safeties and 3 linebackers. So it just depends on the challenge of the week in and week out, as to what we're going to do. And I've always believed that's harder on offenses because they don't know, what they're going to have to prepare for that week. Week in and week out, you're going to have different challenges. Maybe they have a great X receiver, so you want to have a plan to cover him. Well, maybe you move, your best cover guy over there to cover him that game. Well, maybe the next game it's a slot. Well, okay, how do you put someone in position to cover him well? So maybe they have a great tailback that you want to, not let him run the ball up inside. So you play different fronts and ways to bounce the ball. So I think it depends on, every team's a little bit different and what their strengths are. And you're obviously going to try and take away those things week in and week out. And so the structure of the scheme, as well as the people and where they are in the scheme, can change week in and week out based on what we're seeing that week and what the stresses are for the defense.
Welcome back. And that really wasn't coach speak. Watch Zac Alley's defense, and you'll see them bouncing back and forth with regularity between odd and even fronts, sometimes with a single high safety and oftentimes parking 3 safeties up high, Iowa State style. Sometimes they go 3 down across the front, sometimes 4 down with odd front personnel. You even saw Jax State line up with just a pair of true D linemen on the field. In fact, only one team in the country did that more than they did in 2023. Zac Alley's defense is indeed organized chaos with pre-snap movement and 11 parts flying around at high velocity. A week after blistering Middle Tennessee State with 8 sacks and 4 takeaways through a heavy dose of a 3-2-6 look, they opened the game at Lynchburg against Liberty, operating out of the 4-2-5 that folks often associate with Brent Venables. Alley walked the bandit linebacker up to an edge position to create an even front look with 3-3-5 personnel. This was effective enough against quarterback Caden Salters and the Flames offense to force a 3-and-out to start the football game. Twice by flushing Salters out of the pocket to force an incompletion, and a perfectly defended option play to the wide side of the field. The safety flying through there for the TFL on that option, by the way, is heat-seeking missile Fred Perry. He, of course, transferred to West Virginia in December and will be laying licks like this for Zac Alley again this fall. The overall posture of the Liberty offense on the entire first series of the game suggested they got caught flat-footed out of the gate by Alley's game plan. This wasn't what they were expecting to see to start things off. On a critical 3rd down later in the same game at Liberty, Jax State showed Salters 5 down and 6 back with 5 defenders scattered across the front like buckshot before the snap. The Gamecocks brought all 5. Alley dialed up edge pressure while chopping up the front with stunt games. It was obvious the Liberty offensive line had trouble IDing this and passing it off. The dam breaks, and Kamari Stevens and J-Rock Swain converged on the quarterback as Swain dislodged the football and the Gamecocks recovered near midfield. This was the norm for the Jax State defense with Alley in 2023, a unit that produced more sacks from 5-man pressures than any team in Conference USA. A few weeks later at South Carolina against quarterback Spencer Rattler and company, JSU came out again in the 3-2-6 look. This was one of Alley's go-to alignments 2 years ago at Jax State. They deployed this look with the 2nd greatest frequency in the nation. But at Williams-Brice Stadium, Alley's 3-2-6 came with a twist. Offenses might expect nickel or even dime personnel on the field populating a look with 6 non-box defenders. Instead, Jax State and Alley rolled with 4 linebackers, including 5'10", 255-pound bandit J-Rock Swain, out over top South Carolina stud receiver Xavier Legette to give him a jam. And 6'4", 220-pound Larry Worth posted in the middle of the defense, 6 yards over the center, parked neatly behind Jax State's 2 inside backers. This look reduced the South Carolina offense to one dimension, bottling up their ground game and nearly enabling JSU to stun the SEC by upsetting one of its own at home before a late turnover bailed out Shane Beamer's heavily favored squad. Zac Alley, you see, traffics in volume. His call sheet is extensive. He has answers for all situations. To the untrained eye, and probably to a few trained eyes as well, it might look like the football version of mad science orchestrated by a guy who scored like a scientist on his ACT. And it's been effective. The tip of the defensive spear for Zac Alley is pressure. He dials it up from all over the field, from multiple positions, and from both man and zone coverages. 2 years ago at Jacksonville State, Alley's defense led Conference USA in total quarterback pressures with 180. That's nearly 14 a game. They did this while also leading sacks with 38 and quarterback hurries with 129. They didn't let passers get comfortable. Then, as the D coordinator at Oklahoma last year, Alley directed a defense that led the Southeastern Conference in quarterback pressure rate at 39% and and pressures with 6 or more pass rushers. Zac Alley's preparation gives him the confidence to go all in with his defensive play calls if the situation dictates. And good luck trying to get a bead on all of these blitz combinations. His goal is to catch an offense unprepared. And when that happens, the results can be ugly. When Alley's defense gets in a groove, it's hell from above for an opposing quarterback, with safeties dropping down from the rafters, D linemen stunting in every direction, and backers crisscrossing through the A-gaps. Blitzing a talented quarterback without confusing him is like bear hunting with a Nerf gun. All it's going to do is set you up for a painful experience. Any offense worth its salt has plenty of answers to a blitz if they recognize when it's coming and where it's coming from. But that's the rub. When a defensive play caller can foster offensive indecision, when he can confuse them into wasting blockers on ghosts or trick a quarterback into checking into a hot route when he's actually facing a zone coverage, that's when things tilt decidedly the defense's way. Now, when you do bring pressure, you're going to do so against an uncertain and hesitant offense. That is when a blitz concept tends to get home. All right, to flesh this out a little bit, let's jump into the ITG film room and take a look at a few of the ways Zac Alley has managed to keep offenses guessing when they empty the backfield and go with 5 wides. These are the cat and mouse games that go on between quarterbacks and defensive play callers in these situations. Here, Zac Alley's defense matches heads in a man coverage look with no deep safety, putting 6 defenders near the line of scrimmage. 7 if you count the DB manned up on the tight slot aligned just 2 yards outside the tackle box. What Jax State is showing has all the hallmarks of heavy pressure, and that's almost certainly what Western Kentucky quarterback Austin Reed is thinking as he looks things over before the snap. He's either checking into a concept that enables him to get the ball out quickly, or he's considering what quick answer options he might have built into the play that was already called. When he looks to the boundary, he sees the corner in press coverage, and he obviously assumes man. But on the snap, instead of blitzing with 6, the Gamecocks drop 8 into zone coverage, rushing only 3. Austin Reed takes the snap and throws the ball to the quick hitch being run by his receiver into the boundary. Now, a route like this against man, if run with a well-executed vertical push to get the corner to turn his hips and then thrown perfectly out of the receiver's break by the quarterback, might have had a chance. Against zone, though, the good news is the cornerback is bailing. The bad news is the quarterback has to deal with the actual flat defender buzzing out with not much ground to cover to that short side. And that flat defender is exactly who's in position to break up this play and force a 4th down. All right, now we're going to jump ahead to the 4th quarter of the same game back in 2023. Jax State, Western Kentucky. You see Zac Alley signaling his call in. Once they get things set, it's going to be 3rd and a long 15 with Western Kentucky up 7, approaching midfield. Now, Jax State communicating in the secondary, getting lined up with those safeties. Now, watch this safety here. Twin with the quarterback. I'm coming. No, I'm not. Well, then again, maybe I am. Now, you're going to see Western Kentucky line up in the same empty look. Trips wide left this time. Twins to the boundary right. And once again, you're going to see Jax State match heads across the board in the secondary, showing what looks like soft man coverage with 6 defenders in or near the box in a pressure posture. Here, Alley decided to mug up the A-gaps with a bear front. He has a heavy zero technique nose with defenders to each side on his hips. One of those defenders is actually in a 2-point stance. Now remember, the last time earlier in the game that Jax State showed a similar pressure look against Western Kentucky's empty set, they dropped 8 into coverage. So I'm sure that seed's been planted and is still in the mind of Western quarterback Austin Reed as he tries to diagnose this and understand what's going on. All he realizes at this juncture is he better have some sort of quick answer throw built in just in case they do actually bring pressure this time. And as it turns out, that's exactly what happens. This time, Alley isn't bluffing. He doesn't drop 8 into coverage. He goes with a true cover 0 blitz, man coverage across the back end. He pressures with 6 to outnumber Western Kentucky, forcing Reed to go to his quick answer throw, which is a shallow under route to the slot. The safety makes a great tackle in space, and the result is a harmless 4-yard pickup on a 3rd and 15 situation, forcing 4th down. All right, now we go down on the plains to take a look at a highly critical situation in a really tight ball game. Oklahoma's trip to Auburn last year. Just over 4 minutes to go. Auburn driving up 21-16 on the fringe of field goal range. A crucial 3rd down and 4 situation. Auburn goes empty, trips wide left, twins to the boundary. We've seen this before. So this time, how does Zac Alley respond? He doesn't seem to be shy about it here, or is he? 6 across the board, outnumbering Auburn right at the point of attack with 6 potential rushers, matching heads on the back end, across the secondary. This has all the signatures of a cover 0 blitz. And Auburn quarterback Peyton Thorne likely has to be thinking the same thing. Of course, I'm sure he's prepared enough and watched enough tape on Oklahoma's defense with Zac Alley. He doesn't really know whether or not to call the bluff. Is it worth the risk? If you're sitting across the poker table from a guy like this, are you going to go all in and say, hey, I don't think you're bringing pressure. I just think you're showing it. The end result, if you're the quarterback, no matter what you do, you better have an option to get rid of the football quickly, baked into whatever equation you're going to proceed forward with. Because if you're expecting 0, if you're expecting a 6-man pressure and you're an empty with a 5-man protection, you know you got to get it out fast. And something you can always get out fast is a quick slant route. You take the snap, a quick shuffle, and you let the ball go, hitting the receiver right out of his break as he crosses the face of the defender. The slant route is a man coverage beater older than time, and all you need to execute it is a little bit of open space. Look down the middle of the field. You see all this open grass? That's the carrot that Zac Alley is dangling in front of Auburn quarterback Peyton Thorne. Thorne is baited into the slant route, seeing his slot receiver beat the defensive back to the inside. He targets him right out of his break. The problem is, this isn't a 0 pressure. Instead, on the snap, Oklahoma actually engages the offensive line and then drops, rushing only 2 and dropping 9 into coverage. One of those defenders who drops off is right in the throwing lane to pick off the slant route thrown by Peyton Thorne.
It is intercepted! Intercepted by Lewis! Kip Lewis, could he? My oh my! Pick 6!
Showing your teeth only goes so far if you rarely do any actual biting, which is why it's critical to consistently remind the world that you're not like the rest of the pack. You're crazy enough to go through with it. The defensive version of actually sinking your teeth into an opponent is a cover 0 blitz from the middle of the field, showing the quarterback you aren't afraid to leave your secondary exposed if the trade-off is outnumbering his O-line and getting a nasty lick on him. A bluff is only as effective as someone's belief that you aren't bluffing. So let's explore a couple more times Zac Alley went for broke with an actual 0 blitz. Oklahoma on the road at Ole Miss. Quarterback Jackson Dart and company facing a 3rd down in the 4th quarter from their own 34. Ball on the left hash. They go wide bunch, trips right. You're going to see Ole Miss come out and run an old air raid mesh concept with the 2 receivers crossing shallow, trying to basically get a rub and create some friction. They keep the back in as a 6th blocker to help out the offensive line. But what Oklahoma does here, Zac Alley dials up a true 0 blitz, this time rushing 7 to outnumber Ole Miss's 6 blockers. Before the play has a chance to develop, the free runner starts to get home, impacting Jackson Dart, forcing him to throw the football away. The back provides help to the offense's right, allowing Oklahoma to outnumber Ole Miss to the offense's left. Danny Stutzman comes free, and really the only thing Jackson Dart can do is get rid of the football to fight another day. Oklahoma hosting the Alabama Crimson Tide last year, and if Tide quarterback Jalen Milroe is wondering whether this is a bluff or actual man coverage, potentially cover zero, one tell could be the runner in the secondary going with his motion man as Alabama motions to trips to the wide side of the field right. When you get a defensive back running with that motion man, that typically means man coverage. And man coverage is indeed what Oklahoma rolls with here, as Zac Alley goes cover zero and brings 7 defenders on the rush. Now, what's interesting about this is you often think of a cover zero blitz as something that's designed to offset the passing game. But there are times when you face an athletic quarterback like Jalen Milroe that you might do it simply to outnumber the offense in the run game. In this case, they had a lead blocker in their running back, so that 7th defender helped Oklahoma outnumber Alabama in the run concept and get an unblocked hat to help corral Jalen Milroe. All right, here's one more for the road before the ITG film room closes the curtain for the day. Consider it our end credits scene. You might not see Nick Fury in this one, so how about I call your Sam Jackson and raise you a Kanai Walker? Who's that? You'll find out in about 30 seconds. Remember at the top of the podcast when we watched OU corner Eli Bowen read that Bama quick screen like Charlotte's Web and pick off Jalen Milroe? We said it then, and it's worth repeating. Smart players win games, but smart coaches cultivate that intelligence and prepare them to star in game-changing moments. When you watch tape, players with a high football IQ stand out, and that's often an extension of a sharp, perceptive coach helping them see things during game prep that they then ID between the lines. That's the case here with Oklahoma corner Kanai Walker. Houston has the ball on the left hash near the red zone facing a 3rd and long against the Sooners. The Cougars motion to empty, sending running back Parker Jenkins out of the backfield into a quads look wide right. Houston is trying to set up a flare screen, but Kanai Walker is already sniffing it out. It's obvious he was ready for this. Before Jenkins even gets to the hash with his motion, Walker, knowing he has a 3-high cushion behind him on the back end, flies downhill like a bat out of hell and blows the screen up before Houston quarterback Deion Chris can even find the threads on the football. Chris is forced to abandon the play and hit the escape hatch, but he doesn't get free. Because of Walker's smarts putting the Cougars' offense in a terrible spot, OU reaches Chris with just a 3-man rush. Dominic Williams gets credit for a sack that was the direct result of Walker's role in the play. What Walker did won't show up on any stat sheet, but discerning plays like this from shrewd defenders are the cracks between the keys of successful football teams, directly downstream from the type of preparation that wins games. This particular effort has Zac Alley's defensive fingerprints all over it.
Well defended. They blow up the screen on the right side, and Smith gets taken down by Dominic Williams. They may have won that play in the film room this week.
Boy, I got a chance to talk to Zac Alley about the screen game.
All right, that's a wrap for this session in the ITG film room. I hope we didn't get the floor too sticky. Me and the wife took the kids to see Superman last weekend, and I don't know who or maybe even what was in that theater seat before me, but I almost lost a shoe trying to step out of that aisle. At any rate, that's also going to do it for this episode exploring Zac Alley's pressure defense. But if you got anything out of it, don't worry. There was way too much with this topic to cram into just one show. So what we're going to do is post a second installment here in just a handful of days. So if you want to catch part 2 on Zac's defense, plus the 5-part series we recently wrapped up on Coach Rod's offense, we're still getting a ton of great feedback about that one. Be sure to subscribe. Remember, it's free and it really helps us out. There's honestly no better time to get on board what we're doing here at ITG than right now. It's here, folks. It's happening. Mountaineer Players Report Tuesday, and camp gets rolling on Wednesday the 30th. You're going to want to be picking up what we're putting down here as West Virginia rolls into Rich Rod 2.0. Until then, we ask that you be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. For Wesley Euler, buried deep somewhere in the bowels of St. Vincent's College in Latrobe at Steelers camp. For the Runaway Beer Truck, Owen Schmidt, and Skylar Callahan, I'm Jed Drenning. You've been in the gun.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.